Good morning. Welcome. This is Angela Coulter, your consciousness transformation and ascension guide, originator of a practice called Trinity Energy Progression, bringing you this week's Living the Shift. One of the things that we talk about a lot, and actually a lot of the things that motivate us, is to not be lonely, right? I can't say how many times I've spoken with somebody who have talked about how lonely they were, how they desired a companion. And this is it's a really important conversation, because I actually was having this in a text conversation this morning about this understanding of the beliefs around being alone, right? And the other person was talking about how, I've got to just get to that resolution within myself, because there's not always somebody there. We become dependent on other people. And I said, you know what? It's funny, because in many respects, I'm very happy being alone, and yet there are things that I believe are more beneficial by having other people around, right? So ultimately, the key is to get to this complete fluidity of being alone and being with others, and knowing that there's really no difference. Good morning, Laurel. But the funniest thing is, we put a lot of weight on not being alone, right? And we morning, Gloria. We romanticize being with others, especially in like romantic relationships. We romanticize, how the other person completes me, how how I'm only happy when I'm with this person, and all that kind of stuff, or I want to be with them all the time, and when they're not with me, I'm very sad, like things like that. Same thing with, that has the same thing to do with like our family, people around us. There are so many motivations that are under the surface, because the ego comes into this believing in separation, and that exploration of separation and individuality is that I can be alone, right? So the funniest part is there's several steps to that. Number one is that we're never alone, right? You've heard that term, we're never alone. You have your guides, you have angels, you have the non-embodied, the spirits, those who've passed on, your loved ones, ancestors, you have all that kind of stuff. You have the universe, you have, God, source, whatever. When you shift your consciousness, when we start to shift our consciousness to a place of saying, well, I am God, right? And so anyway, so that former, that's absolutely true, right? You always have the universe, the multiverse, around you, and it's like looking at the 2 to 3 trillion cells in your body is like, well, when is the cell by itself? Well, it's always by itself, and it's never by itself, right? Because it's got its singular purpose, its singular reason for existing, and yet it then is interrelated with everything that's around it to function in the way that it is to create, right? In the larger scale of the body, the organs in the body. So, excuse my yawn. So, the other side of that is when we embrace that we are God, that we are the divine, and that all that we see around us, all that we experience, all that we believe to be separate people, separate things, separate beings, separate, pets or animals or plants or anything, is all a part of us as source, as part of the divine consciousness or God, source, universe, whatever you want to call it. And so you realize that we're always alone, because there is that whole divine consciousness in its entirety, right? So then it's sort of like this, always alone, never alone. So really, you're me, and so there's nobody besides me, so I'm always alone. There's sort of like this circle you can go around in. So when you come at to it from that perspective, it's a matter of our addiction to having others around us, our addiction to the belief that we have to have others around us to be fulfilled, to be happy. Now, I know many people who are very extremely introverted who would argue with me to say, oh, no, 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 I'd rather be alone. I'd rather be myself. What's really interesting is the past, 7 months, with what's been going on in the world with the COVID thing or whatever, has given the opportunity for many people to be by themselves when they are not used to being so. And even some of the most introverted people I know who are so happy to be alone by themselves have been like craving other people and craving being around others. So the question is, so why? Why is that belief in there that we have to have somebody else, that we have to have others to complete us, to make us feel happy? And in my case, what I was looking at is, why is it that I look at things, sometimes I see things better when I am bouncing them off somebody else. Sometimes I see things better myself, like in doing sessions with other people. I always laugh and say it's great to get paid to do my self-work. Because when I do sessions, a lot of times I'll be like, oh, there's an answer that I've been waiting to get clarity on. And of course, that's attracted to me to reflect back to me for that resolution, as well as in helping that person resolve it within themselves. But they're me too, right? So when we start looking at the universe from that perspective and we start experiencing it from that, we will immerse ourselves, and we do immerse ourselves in the enjoyment of saying, okay, well, you are me expressed as you, right? You are the divine expressed as you, or I'm the divine expressed as me. And what a beautiful facet we all are. Like, look at the beautiful facet of interrelation and this beautiful gemstone we've created. Oh, whoa, there's a big frequency right there. Wow. That one's really loud. And so obviously I hit on something there. So when we start to really, really focus and accept that, and then we see the beauty of the interrelationship and all the facets, well, then we have a new appreciation for having everything around us and having our own and different embodiments all around us. And we are sort of addicted to that from a higher perspective. The reason I feel like it's important to talk about this is that things are going to be shifting pretty dramatically in the short and long term. And there's something around the corner that many of us sort of feel is coming. And I think there's some big changes. But the understanding is really to be in this place of comfort. Now, many of us have gotten these messages over the past decade or so to get to a place where you're absolutely okay with being on your own and by yourself, as well as being absolutely okay and comfortable being with other people and having no preference, like being able to be in both and be completely comfortable and whatever, and not yearning for something else. So when we talk about being alone versus being lonely, so lonely is an ego-based word. So lonely is an a word based in separation and exclusion to say, when I'm lonely, when I'm lonely, it means that I feel like I need to have somebody else here, right? I feel like, like when somebody says, oh, I'm lonely, meaning, oh, I crave to have somebody else, something to love me, somebody to cuddle with, somebody to laugh with, somebody to do things with. And we actually sort of pity, culturally, in terms of the ego, we pity those who are lonely, right? We look at that as a detriment. And so then people believe that, and they take that on for themselves and believe that it's a detriment. However, when we come into this realization and consciousness of remembrance and wholeness, well, guess what? That's the word right there. Wholeness is, we talk about oneness a lot. The other part of that is wholeness. And in wholeness, when we come into that within ourselves, we realize that I don't have a hole that needs to be filled by somebody else's company, by somebody else's, agreement, or having somebody else. Then we get to a place of saying, okay, well, I'm perfectly happy as I am. So here's the double-edged sword. There are so many in the conscious world, who are single, and they're comfortable being single. But what's funny is the ego starts to creep back in and says, "Oh, we would love to have a companion. It would be great to have a companion." And that's not that it's not great, but it's like, is that a yearning, or is that truly like, yeah, okay, it would be great to have a companion, and it would be great to be fine and I'm fine as I am. So how do you, because we prioritize and say, okay, well, I've done all this stuff. And it's funny because we act like, okay, I've done all this stuff. I've done all my self-work. I've had this time on my own and done all this stuff. And now I'm ready to have a companion. And it's like, because it's almost like in the back of your mind, listen to this, the ego is whispering, oh, look at all the chores you did. Look at all the things you did to work hard so that you could get this reward of having a companion that is, in this different vibration, all that kind of stuff. And it's like, and then you start to expect that and say, well, how come I haven't gotten that yet? So that's actually a little ego like pinging of going, oh, well, I would really love a companion. Where's my companion? Why don't I have a companion? And that's an egoic thing, because then that's this feeling of lack, going, well, what do you feel like you're going to get by having a companion that you don't already have? Right? The key is, and what I tell anybody who comes in to me, whether it's for a friend, a yearning for a friend, or, a mate or romantic relationship, I always say the biggest thing is to get to this place of saying, I'm great as I am, and I'm great with somebody else. And there's no real difference. Yes, there's different aspects of myself that come out, maybe. But I can allow those to come out no matter who I'm with and where I am. So it's really, the key is, and what does that come down to? It comes down to self-love, which, it's like I can play the recording now. Self-love, down to worthiness. When we truly come to a place of unconditional self-love and acceptance, then we are perfectly happy on our own. We could be on that desert island and not have another soul in sight or anything for as long as whatever, and we'd be fine. Now, it's funny because in psychology, we talk about how we crave interaction or whatever, and that's this programming that we've created in separation, right, to bring together. So if cells are separated, right, they can't complete their function of what they're making up. So then they have this natural attraction, this magnetism to each other for the purpose that they are here for, right? So what if we're all just cells in the bigger picture, which we are in the same way? I see the multiverse as this concentric existence in consciousness. So what cells are we a part of? The earth, right? Is that our body? And so we're here to function in a certain way. And we know the big design at some level, and we have embodied separately to be able to create that beautiful symphony. So then we're created to believe we need to be a part of everything else. And the key is to remember that we choose that. We choose to be a part of that. So Gloria says, but a companion to me is someone to have discussions with, plan trips, but definitely not someone to make me feel whole or cling on to. Except, well, why do you have to plan trips with them? You can go on trips by yourself. I go on trips by myself. I love traveling by myself. And I love traveling with other people. So that's the whole idea, is like many people say, oh, well, I'm not doing this because I don't have somebody to do this with. Well, then why don't you just do it by yourself? Well, then there's this perception, I'm too old, something could happen to me. Well, something could happen to you in your shower, but you're not going to have somebody in the shower with you every day, and that's part of these whole, like I said, these culturally embedded expectations of, oh, you should have somebody there, it's safer, and all this kind of stuff. Now, here's the thing. Yes, do I know situations where people have had others around them in a moment when it was very important to have somebody else around them to help? Yes, of course I do. But that, of course, was divinely orchestrated as from all those higher selves to bring together, to be together in that moment at that time. So, like the ego always wants to say, "Well, what if I didn't? Um, what if I didn't? What if I? What if the person hadn't been there? What if? What if? What if? What if? What if? What if next time they aren't there?" And it's like, except if they're to be there, then they are. And like that comes to that place of when we get into this place of presence and wholeness, we get to this place of saying, well, everything's perfect. Everything is divinely orchestrated, and we know that. And so we can observe and trust. Well, then the cells that are brought together are perfect in the moment, and then the people who are brought together are perfect in the moment, and then they are not there if they're not, if it's not perfect, like they're elsewhere, and it's that interrelation, and it's a very beautiful symphony that we've created. And I always say it is incredible to see the amount of complexity we've created, and we love this. We love this amazing universe we've created, and we should because it's, look at how amazing and interrelated everything is. So the key is, we talk about being lonely, right? And somebody who's watching this who feels very lonely would say, screw you. Screw you. You just obviously don't know what it feels like. And it's like, well, I've had many very lonely experiences in my life. And you know what, by the way, many can be surrounded by people at all times and still feel lonely. In fact, when I first had what I call my grand awakening, before I started sharing it with my husband and talking with others, because I didn't really know what was going on, it was a very lonely experience, because we crave somebody who understands us at the same level of the experience that we're having, because we believe that makes us okay and acceptable, and that we have to share, and it's like, okay, well, it's like me doing these videos, right? So I had long ago really depended on a lot having to do with who was watching and all that kind of stuff. And basically guidance was only do it if you want to do it. Do it like you're just talking to yourself. And if nobody watches it, then be okay with that. So, and think about that, because then, the mind says, oh, but I've got to make money, and I've got to do this, and I've got to do that. And it's like, well, but the thing is to shift our place to doing stuff, because that's where we are in wholeness. That's where we are in the expression of ourselves, versus that's what I'm doing to attract a relationship. And that could be a customer relationship too, or, a friend, or when we talk about, soul tribe. Oh, I'll do this to attract my soul tribe. And we do, but the thing is, it's a natural thing. That's that natural vibration of when I'm holding that vibration of wholeness and self-love and self-acceptance and fusion of the enjoyment of my own experience. Well, then I start to attract others who are in that same vibration. And then we have an amazing time together, because it's a connection without attachments. And it's to say, okay, it's great for us to come together, and then it's great for us to move forward, and not be together. And it's funny, because there are some really close friends I have, and I feel absolutely amazing when we're together. And the key lesson for us, because we're so like, we talk consciousness, we live consciousness, we have such amazing magical experiences together, and then we go and do our individual things, as we're called, and and there are moments when I miss them, but then I recognize also in observance that I'm missing them through the ego, because we're always connected. And that's actually true, because we cannot talk to each other for a month or 2 months or 5 months or a year, and then we connect together, and there's absolutely no skipping a beat. If actually, case in point, let's see, what's today? Thursday, Tuesday, I went on a day with a friend of mine who I see about once, sometimes twice a year, and we don't typically talk very much. we're in each other's sort of periphery, but I feel like I love hanging out with this person, and we always go on a hike, we always go in nature, we always have amazing experiences, we always have so much parallel, so much to talk about, so much to share. And it's funny because like all of a sudden out of nowhere, one of us will be like, hey, I think it's time for us to go on a hike. I think it's time for us to go and do that. And actually, was it last year? No, it was 2 years ago. We actually did a trip together for like 5 days. Had a great time. And the funniest thing is like, otherwise we have like no interaction with each other in each other's day-to-day lives. But it's like we have this connection. We trust the connection. It's a space of love and acceptance, right? That we hold within ourselves, and then we share together. And then it's like, okay, sometimes it's time for us to come together and share something. And it's great. And it's like it reminds us of ourselves and reflecting back to each other. And then we just move on. And there's no neediness. There's no lack like in there. There's no like, and really there's no sadness. It's like, okay, and every time I see this person, it's such a great testament to this, because every time I see this person, at the end of the day, after we've had a fabulous time, which we always do, I say, we hug, and in departing, we say, till next time. And that's it. There's no promises, oh, we should do this more often, oh, blah, blah, blah. It's basically, till next time. Because that's how it goes. And that's such a great freedom to have. When we get to that place, and then it's like, okay, I almost feel like everything becomes even more luscious and more nourishing in everything that we do when we come from that place of wholeness and sharing versus versus needing and lack. A vast majority of what we call romantic relationships are built on lack, as we've had them for a long time, because they teach us a lot of lessons about ourselves, right? And basically, the reason to have those relationships where we're connected like that is to just be able to see things within ourselves that we haven't seen otherwise or can't see otherwise. And so we have that person in front of us and with us for whatever period of time that is, reflecting back to us constantly because of the closeness of the relationship. And then so what happens is we lose that perspective, or we have lost that perspective, and we believe that person is what brings it to us, what brings that whatever that allows us to express our joy by being them, instead of realizing that they're just reflecting back to us what we already have. So when we change that energy to say, okay, well, you have something that I don't, then of course I'm going to feel like I'm missing something when you're not there. But when I attract somebody who holds this vibration that reflects back to me something that I really enjoy, then it's something to be happy about within myself, and of course enjoy with the other person, because then when you're in that place of wholeness, then all you're going to reflect back to yourself is wholeness, and then it feels even better. So it's this upward cycle or downward cycle. And if you feel like, there are many people who believe that they need to remain in a relationship because it's better than being alone. And so then when we think that within ourselves, the key is to look inside and say, what is it that I believe is a punishment about being alone? Because when we sit there and say, well, I don't know, I did all the work and I've done all this stuff and I don't understand why I still don't have a companion, we're still implying that being alone is a punishment and being with a companion is a reward or an inspired state, an inspired situation. And then we say, okay, well, what about marriage? And then you're together, and then for what X amount of years or whatever period of time. Well, that's funny because I've said for such a long time, it's time for us to really rehash the entire, throughout the whole book of marriage, and let's rewrite it. Because, it's this binding, it started out as this binding contract of property and all that kind of stuff. And now it's like, when we come into this place of wholeness, do we really need marriage? A. And B is, well, what if we just looked at it as, okay, well, we're in each other's space to reflect whatever there is to reflect. And when that time comes that reflection is done, then it might be time for us to move forward. And that's okay. See how many things that we have, and I think about all the things I watch. And it was funny, I was watching a show that I picked up on Netflix, that because we really haven't had much to watch, and something I had missed. And it's a decent show, but it's about this guy in his 30s and going through like figuring out his life and stuff. And it's like, wow, you can just see what drives many people from not being alone, from feeling lonely, right? That drives them to be with somebody else that might not be a mix, a good match vibrationally for them from a place of independence. And yet so many of us get in relationships that we're like, okay, well, it's okay. It's okay. And what do we say? Oh, well, I get his benefits, or I get her benefits, or there's a financial benefit, or there's this, or, it's better than being alone, or it's at least a known evil. Like, I can't tell you how many times I've heard these kind of things. And what's really important to look at is to say, so Gloria says, there you are sacrificing, then you're sacrificing your soul, your ability to grow and change. And I didn't know where that came in. Sometimes these things get delayed in talking too. But when we look at all of these relationships, and our motivations to have them, and we stop saying, and we listen to ourselves, because I can't tell you how many times I've been in a session and I've said, just listen to yourself. When you're saying, I just can't live without this person, or I'm so lonely, I need a companion. So when I always tell people, when we say the word need, want, that's always coming from a place of lack, right? Meaning that you don't already have that. And we're really addicted to the idea of having to, like, that, oh, we're supposed to find some other match, this split apart, what do you want to call it, a twin soul, a soulmate, whatever, that's what's going to complete us. And it's like, well, actually probably pretty much the opposite, because the higher vibration, now, by the way, all of us are soulmates when we cross each other's paths. Gloria says, by staying in a healthy relationship, right? Then you're sacrificing your soul, your ability to grow and change. That is true. And that's the thing. A vast majority of people in relationships that have been long-term are unhappy, and they stay because they believe, oh, well, it's better than being alone. And then they do sacrifice, because in unhealthy relationships, it's when they keep on sacrificing themselves, or demanding somebody else to sacrifice themselves to accommodate what you want to fill this hole that you believe you have, and you're putting it on them to do that, and vice versa, or taking it on to do that for them. So, like, I can't tell you how many times I've talked to people who said, oh, well, I mean, there were people I know who say, I couldn't leave. There's one person I know who's like, well, I couldn't leave because I tried to leave and he got so depressed he just couldn't function. So I just couldn't bear it, and I went back. And I'm like, nowhere in there said you really wanted to be with them. And so, and this happened several times in this particular relationship. And it's like, well, that's the lesson. It's like, why do you believe? And by the way, somebody can only hold you in filling a hole of theirs if they believe that's the case, and that's their journey. And whether or not you allow that, that's your journey. And so they can kick, they can scream, they can be angry, they can self-sabotage, they can do all this kind of stuff. Yes, it's also to fear of change and being by yourself, like, right? Because we hide behind our significant others often. Women especially do that. But men do that too. Men do it in a different way than women culturally. But it's still the same thing. I've worked with both. I've worked on both, with people on both sides, right? Men and women. And with women, a lot of times you hide behind your kids, you hide behind your spouse, right? Oh, my spouse does this. And I've heard people just sit and talk about what their spouse does forever. But when you ask them about themselves, they will just totally not want to, like, they'll give you a very short answer. And they're like, oh, well, I take care of my kids, or I take care of my family, or whatever. Well, guess what? On the men's side, you get that too. A lot of times men will talk about, oh, well, I provide for my family. I do this, so that I can, and so, I have these amazing kids and this spouse and blah, blah, blah. So it's a cultural expectation of, well, the only way you're a good person is by sacrificing a part of yourself for other people, to take care of other people. Oh, we have that going around very prominently in the world right now. And it's like, oh, well, and they say, they exalt the idea of, oh, well, don't do it for you, do it for other people. You don't ever do anything for other people. The reality is you do it for yourself. When you say you're doing something for other people, like to say, oh, well, I'm not doing it for myself, I'm doing it for somebody else. That means that you're doing it for somebody else so that you get the acknowledgement either by them or by others around them on how good of a person you are, which means that you don't believe that then you need that. So that means that you don't believe that within yourself. So there's a lot of shifting to do within all. See how many layers there is? And again, and how many times, like, we call it herd mentality, right? And how or mob mentality, when people just get lost in the energy of a group of people and they don't think for themselves. And then there are negative connotations of the, like, people call things like sheeple or whatever, that follow just the herd and all that kind of stuff. And that's all that belief about, I can't be alone, I can't stand alone, because that would be lonely, and then I would be wrong or bad or evil or whatever, or people wouldn't think positively of me, so therefore then I would not think positively of myself. See how that turns all around? I always laugh and say nobody ever does something, like, when you say you're doing something for somebody, you're not doing it for somebody else, you're doing it for yourself. So ultimately, and how you feel about doing that for them. When people say, oh, I feel good when I do this for other people, it's like, well, then do you feel good about yourself when you're not doing it for other people? Because then here's the thing, what shifts when we get to this place of wholeness and recognition of wholeness and self-love is that, and I talked about this Monday, it's funny, so I was like, oh, wow, I haven't had a connection into my Monday podcast with Sarah C. Gavagnoni, the Ascended World. But when we get to that place of living in a place of, I have self-love and I nourish myself and I attend to myself and prioritize myself from that self-love, then what happens is you become this amazing effusion of love, and then you can't help but help other people, right? And then you pretty much, people say, like, people are blessed by their presence. Well, yeah, that's the whole thing, is we bless each other with our presence from that place of love. And guess what? We hold this place of vibration that raises everything and shifts us, helps us all shift collectively. That's what we mean, too, when we talk about, well, the way to save the world is to save yourself, to turn around and look inside and do your inner work. Because when you get to that place, if we all got to this place of unconditional self-love, remember that place of unconditional self-love, let go of all these externalizations and neediness, and recognize that being alone is what we always are, even in the reflection of all that's around us, and that we are this amazing divine infinite consciousness, and there's nothing that can be outside of us. Then it becomes more like womb-like and embracing, right? And then you just know that everything is perfect. And then you're not seeking outside of yourself. You're not sacrificing. You are not giving away a part of yourself that you feel you have to, so that somebody else will love you or approve of you. And again, underneath all of that tends to be this fear of being alone and abandoned, right? There's a huge thing about abandonment and self-work. So yeah, this is a tip of the iceberg. But the key is this week is to look in the mirror at yourself. Look at where you are feeling like you have to be with somebody for something, where you feel like you're not as happy without somebody in your presence, or, whether it's an individual, a group of people, or if you have somebody who's in your life who is not, who really is not reflecting the highest or the wholest part of you back to yourself. And requiring you to sacrifice, or martyr yourself or whatever, then the question is, ask yourself why. What am I afraid of? Why am I afraid of being alone? And usually that comes down to worthiness. Okay, which is being, that's my other key, the other key word that always comes up in this podcast, as well as the one I do on Mondays. So look in the mirror this week and ask yourself, what is it? Where am I attached to the need to have somebody else there for me to feel fulfilled in any way? And that's what's key for me to look at underneath about why am I afraid of being alone? Why am I afraid of standing alone? And then looking at the worthiness issues around that and working on shifting that within yourself. See, simple as that. We got it all solved. So on that, I'm going to go. Thank you for joining me. Do this, because this is a really powerful, and once we shift into all that, it changes the motivation on how we act and what we do and how we live and everything else. So on that, have a great week. We'll see you next time. Thanks for joining me. This is Angela Coulter signing off with this week's Living the Shift. Have a great one.